Right.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, everybody, to our YouTube live class on tech support, part 2. What do you do with technology in your home?
We're really excited for you guys to be joining us today. I feel like we had a good start to our conversation last week. We kind of set up the need and the reason that we're doing this tech support class, and we talked a little bit about cell phones. We gave you guys a contract that you could share with your kids if they're approaching the time that they're going to be getting a cell phone. We hope that you took a chance to look at that contract. If coincidentally you decided to buy your kid a cell phone this week, maybe you use that contract with them. But if not, we hope you'll keep it in mind for the future, because we really feel like it'll be a positive tool for you as you kind of maintain their positive relationship with technology and cell phones.
Yeah, and if you are not subscribed to our parent emails, or if you're not following us on Facebook or on Instagram, make sure you do that. We try to stay connected with you all throughout the week and let you know about all the important stuff we have coming up, like this class or other events.
Or Easter.
Easter is when, Evan?
Third Sunday of this month. It's going to be great.
Is that April 21st?
Is it?
Yes.
It's April 21st. Yes.
It's actually a trick question. It's April 20th and 21st because we have a Saturday night service as well. So we've got one on Saturday night starting at 6:30. There will be kids and student stuff that time. Mm-hmm. And we also got 3 on Sunday, one at 8, one at 9:30, and one at 11. 11 is the only one that there is no kids or student stuff. There is nursery only.
Yep.
So we got kids and student stuff, just as a review, Saturday at 6:30 and Sunday at 8 and 9:30. And then an 11 o'clock service for everybody else as well.
So, again, make sure that you follow us on social media, that you subscribe to this YouTube channel for more student ministry stuff. This is not kids ministry, this is student ministry. But follow kids ministry and student ministry on social media to stay up to date on all that.
Yeah. So, just as a review, last week when we talked about this, we talked about how a couple of the big highlights is, one, we want our kids and our students to be able to manage their technology in a healthy way by the time they leave the house. You want them to be able to live out their senior year at home with you with no rules, no regulations, that they can, they're not being monitored, they can utilize their technology however they want, but hopefully you've trained them up to that point to be able to handle that responsibility. Mm-hmm. And you have that senior year as a safety net where the first time they're having all that freedom is not when they go off to college and they're living on their own and there's no more accountability or safety net for them if they were to make some mistakes. Their senior year, they can still have the freedom to make some mistakes, and you're there for them to catch them when they make them. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what we talked about. We also talked about openness and honesty as a priority when it comes to not only the way you deal with technology in your home, but in every area in your home. You want openness and honesty to be a standard that's just how your house is. That's how your family runs.
Yeah.
And that'll help you when it comes to technology as well. So a lot of times when we think about rules that don't apply to technology, there's openness and honesty that go along with that as a priority. And so when it comes to technology, that doesn't change. Mm-hmm. So, Evan, what that brings us to, what happens when we have to address a misusage of technology within the home?
So I would say, first things first, be aware as a parent, you're going to have to address misuses of technology. Every parent hopes that they will have the perfect child and never have to address anything about anything, and they'll just raise themselves. I mean, that's what I hoped for, but the perfect child doesn't exist. And in nearly every aspect of our lives, we're all going to make mistakes. So I would say right off the bat, be aware you're going to have to address things with your kids. Because technology is as predominant as it is, you're going to have to address misuses of technology for sure. They're going to make mistakes, and it doesn't make your kid a bad kid. It also doesn't make you a bad parent. We're going to talk about some heavy stuff later on. You need to know, if you find porn on your kid's phone, you're not a bad parent. And that's part of what we want to prep you for tonight. Just being aware, things are going to happen, and you need to have a plan. You need to have a plan in place for how you're going to address it.
And also, this is why openness and honesty is such a high priority, because knowing that you are going to have to address a misusage of technology at some point, because kids make mistakes, then it's just that much more important that you've established from the beginning. And if you didn't get the phone contract or whatever that Evan mentioned earlier that we talked about last week, I encourage you to get that. That's where this will really come in handy, because you say, hey, from the beginning, when they have technology, they know that's being monitored by you. Not because you don't trust them, but because it's your obligation as a parent to protect them and to know what's going on. Just like you have to know who they're talking to when they're not on their phones, when it comes to who's at school with them and if they, stranger danger, all that kind of stuff. The same is true with technology. You have to know who they're talking and interacting with. So if you find something and they don't know that you're spying on them and now you have to confront them, that makes that conversation that much harder than if you were just to be open and honest up front. And then when you do have to confront them, you pull out that contract and you say, hey, this covenant we made, you agree to it. There's your signature, and we got to talk about this. And maybe it's serious, and maybe it's as simple as, hey, who is this? This person keeps coming up, and I don't recognize them. That's where openness and honesty will really help you. So when you have to address it, the number one principle, I think, is don't freak out, because this is going to be your first inclination. And maybe you've already had to deal with this, and you were so shocked by what you discovered that you approached them and confronted them guns a-blazing, and it did not go well. Because here's what happens. If you freak out, your kids shut down.
Yeah.
So regardless of how shocked you are or how upset you are or feeling betrayed or just angry that you are with your kids, you have to hide it, at least to some extent. No matter how shocked you are, you have to be able to approach them and not be freaking out.
Yeah.
Because if you freak out, they shut down. But if you don't freak out, you learn something. And your goal would be hopefully to learn something. You don't want them to just give you some kind of BS excuse for whatever you found. You want them to actually be able to be honest with you. So don't freak out.
And it's not just a momentary shutdown either. When your kids see that freak out, I mean, I can think even with me as an adult, if there have been people who, I bring something to and they overreact, I just stop going to them. I'm like, all right, well, I'm just not going to talk to you about this anymore because you're freaking out. And so be aware that obviously you can course correct. Mistakes in the past don't have to be repeated, but be aware that the way, especially the way you react initially, freaking out can often cause kids to just not come back to you again in the future. So remember, it can go beyond even just that very first conversation.
Absolutely. Secondly, remember, if you have to address something with your kids, remember that they are not responsible for what their friends say.
Yeah.
Just like if they're sitting at the lunch table and their friend tells a dirty joke, they are not responsible for that. The same is true on their phones. Sometimes they've been asking for it, but sometimes they haven't been. A lot of times, unfortunately, in youth culture, there's text messages, there's images that get sent around.
Yep.
There's friend or follow requests from spam accounts that are not appropriate. And so if they receive something on their phone or on their iPad or whatever, if they don't have a phone yet but they have an iPod that has Wi-Fi connection and has all the apps an iPhone has, if they receive something on there, that doesn't necessarily make them guilty. So you can respond by asking questions, again, not freaking out, and maybe you'll learn something, and then you can have a conversation if there's one that needs to be had. But a lot of times the temptation can be to freak out and to want to punish your kid for what you found on their phone. But sometimes if you give them an opportunity, they'll be able to explain to you, like, I didn't ask for that, they sent that to me. So just remember that, keep that in mind. Also, remind them of the agreement that you've made with them.
Yep. That signature only does so much. I mean, it's great, it's important, but if you don't bring it back up again, then it doesn't really serve a purpose. So bring it up on a fairly regular basis, I would say. Just kind of continually remind them, because you should be having these conversations on a regular basis.
It shouldn't be taboo that, oh no, I should probably bring it up again, I feel guilty that I haven't. But it should be something that's a regular part of your family life and your conversations, with the priority of openness and honesty. And so, that way also, if they do step out of line and there is something you have to address that is their fault, then it's not you punishing them because they made such a bad decision. It's, hey, these are just the consequences we discussed. So whether that's taking their phone away, shutting down the app store, or whatever, I mean, you're the parent, you decide. But that way they chose the consequence by their actions because they knew the agreement going into it.
And remind your kids that openness and honesty is your goal. That's your priority. And I would say too, help them to understand that that's That's a two-way street. That's something that benefits them. Remind them that your goal is to have those open, honest conversations so that way in the future when things come up and they need help, they can come to you. But I would even take it a step further. Encourage them to when you have those open and honest conversations, then your kid can feel confident to come to you and say, hey, I'd like to go hang out with this friend, or I'd like to do this, or sometimes even, and you might not like this, you might disagree with this, but with me as a kid, if my parents gave me a punishment and I felt that punishment was unfair, I could respectfully say, I don't think this punishment is unfair, or is fair, rather. And if it often didn't change anything for me to say that, but make that two-way street, because then it'll help your kid feel like, hey, I'm getting something out of this as well. It's not just you enforcing this upon me. We're having an open, shared relationship, and prioritize that. When you do have to address things, always come at it from the goal of saying we want to be open and honest with each other, not have to hold secrets.
And also, this is a preemptive way to let them know, and even maybe have this specific conversation, that if you get sent something, or if something happens, suddenly a conversation kind of goes awry, like, you're not responsible for that if you come and you tell me what's happening.
Yeah.
Because my parents had this code word with me, and maybe you have the same kind of thing set up, but if I was at a friend's house and suddenly the tone shifted around 1 a.m, or something like that, and they wanted to watch a movie, which I knew was not appropriate, I could call my parents and say, hey, I don't feel well. And that was code for something's going down that I'm not comfortable with, come and pick me up. And that was okay. So in the same way, have this understanding that, hey, if something happens, if the tone shifts in a conversation, in a text conversation, or in a DM on Insta or Snapchat, then they can come and talk to you, and they're not in trouble because they're bringing you into it and they don't know what to do in this uncomfortable situation. A lot of times, here's what will happen is, and Kurt Holcroft talked about this a little bit a year and a half ago when we did another version of this class, is there's times where maybe an older guy will connect with a girl that's just a couple, 2, 3, 4 years younger than her. She'll feel really special because of that attention, and the conversations will be really innocent for a while until it's not, and then all of a sudden the conversation will start to shift, and maybe that was weird, but maybe not, because they're the older one, and they've been respectful so far, so I don't have a reason to think that they're making me feel uncomfortable on purpose. Maybe this is just normal. Yeah. But then something will clearly happen. They'll ask for something, or they'll say something that's like, okay, now this is definitely weird. But now they're in the conversation. They've been in this conversation with someone for so long, maybe through a couple months of texting or whatever, that now they feel like they're too deep into it to come to you, because, well, now I'm going to be in trouble because I've been having conversations with this person for a long time. We'll have this conversation in advance about openness and honesty. Say, hey, if you find yourself in a situation where you find it's uncomfortable and you don't know how it got there, you're still welcome to come to me, and you won't be in trouble.
Absolutely.
Because they need to know that they can talk to you about stuff, even if they feel a little bit guilty because they don't know how it got into a sticky situation.
And be aware, too, that people who are seeking to manipulate can often be really crafty, and most of the time you're going to hit the point in a conversation where you've done something that maybe you're not proud of. You're probably going to hit that point before you realize that the conversation has actually become dangerous or risky. Most of the time, by the point your kid realizes something's wrong, they've already done something that maybe they don't want you to know about. So it's very important to not immediately jump to punish your kid or whatever. It's important to establish that relationship that says, even if you feel guilty, even if you feel like you've done something wrong, the goal is not for me to find out about everything you did wrong so that I can punish you and make sure I've checked all my check boxes on the punishment list. The goal is to make sure that I can help you, that we can have these honest conversations, and that I can help you kind of dig your way back out.
And to learn from the situation, and just as a parent, to protect you.
Yep.
That's important too. We're monitoring you not because we don't trust you, but because we have an obligation to protect you. So, also, this brings up, what happens if they are sent something that is illegal? Evidence of narcotics or something like that, or more probably relevant would be they receive a sext, or one of their peers, even if they're in middle school or high school, that sends something even though they themselves are underage, it's still child pornography. And there have been several students in our school district that have gotten suspended or expelled because they went, oh my gosh, look what this person sent me. Because that's distribution at that point. And they can verify if something was sent by going back to phone records and phone companies and stuff. Even if it was on a disappearing message, that stuff doesn't actually really disappear forever.
Yep.
And so it's not too difficult to track that stuff down. And if they've got witnesses saying they flipped their screen around and showed other people, they are now in trouble of distributing minor or child pornography. So it's something to be aware of. So you should have that conversation with them. But it's also important to here's what you do. Here's what you train your kid to do if they do receive something like this. Delete it immediately.
Yeah.
Delete it immediately, and tell you about it. And as the parent, you can make the call if you need to go to the authorities or not. If it's something that you feel like so and so needs to know about this, then go to those parents or go to the authorities or whatever you need to do. But as your kids, don't tell them, don't show me. I don't need to see it. You need to delete it, and then tell me what happened. So those are the action steps to do if that happens.
Yeah.
So that kind of segues into our next topic, which is the elephant in the room, which is what I think every parent wants to know how to defend against, and we all know it's out there, and that is pornography.
Yeah.
So that's often the number one concern that parents have with their kids having technology.
Well, and rightfully so, because pornography at this point is so much more accessible, so easy to reach, and it leaves a lot less of a paper trail than it used to. It used to be
literally,
quite literally. It used to be something where pornography was something that you had to either go somewhere that your parents probably would not let you go, or you'd have to find a magazine or something along those lines. But now pornography is in our kids' pockets with them everywhere they go.
Yeah, so let's define this for a second, and we'll come back to this definition because the waters can get really muddy here, and as parents, we need to understand where they're at developmentally, and that this affects them differently than it would us. So the definition of pornography is printed or visual material containing the explicit description or display of sexual organs or activity, intended to stimulate erotic rather than aesthetic or emotional feelings. And this is really important because our culture really normalizes the aesthetic side of things. There will be something that stimulates erotic feelings, and it'll be presented as something that's aesthetic. And your kids often don't know the difference between those. That applies to what they're actually posting from their vacations, or what they are seeing from friends or from just other people if they've got access, even if they have private accounts, then they can see publicly what everybody else is posting. So stuff that could be presented in an aesthetic way that is received as an erotic thing on their end. So real quick, let's go through a couple statistics. There's a resource in the link in this description to much more, but the top two that I want to talk about are these. So a third, and this was from a study done a couple of years ago, so it's probably a little different now, but a third of 11 to 14 year olds have watched porn on a mobile device. 33%. And about half of 15 to 17 year olds have accessed porn on a smartphone or mobile device or tablet. And that's a huge number. Huge. And this again, with our culture kind of normalizing erotic images, this makes the line so much more blurry for them, and it also it's affecting the way that they text and talk to each other. It's affecting what gets posted and what gets viewed and what gets likes and what gets follows. It affects how physical they are willing to go in their relationships, and it also muddies just on the basic faith-based spiritual level of things. It affects where they're at spiritually when it comes to some of these issues. And so this is really difficult. There's lots of links that studies have done that there's direct links to levels of anxiety and depression with pornography usage. It's 10 times more addictive than heroin, which is the most addictive drug. And so not to scare you with any of that, because you probably know some of that, but just to be aware how big of a deal this is, that we need to be proactive in some things that we don't generally think of as being proactive against.
And it's good to be aware, too, as we said from the beginning, that this is something that impacts good kids. Most of the time when a kid is exposed to pornography, it's not because they were seeking it out. It's because they were exposed to it. It's because they clicked on something that they didn't intend to, and something appears. It's because they went out and were doing a Google image search for something innocent, and an image pops up that wasn't filtered properly, and there it is. It's because a friend on the bus shows them something on their phone. So please know, if you find pornography on your kid's phone, if you find things along those lines, doesn't mean you have a bad kid. And also know that the opposite is true too. If you have a kid and you know you've got a really good kid who doesn't break the rules, who doesn't push boundaries, that doesn't mean they won't be exposed to pornography. And then I would say too, kind of be aware of the normalization that has happened in culture. The reason that this is such a big deal right now, bar none, is this. This is the reason it's such a big deal now. But there's another aspect to it too. I think maybe the second reason that porn has become such a big issue recently is that it's accepted and normalized in our culture.
As entertainment.
As entertainment. I'm going to step on toes here. I apologize. I don't care. Just to put it, I don't care that I'm going to step on toes.
I'm sorry, but I don't care.
Right, because this is an important thing.
Yeah.
So let me pad this by saying, you're an adult. You have the right to choose any kind of entertainment that you want, and I'm not judging you for that. That's you. But let's kind of think for a moment about culture. Right now, if you were to think of the TV show that everybody's watching, it's Game of Thrones. Everybody talks about it. Every time you pull up Facebook, you see people posting stuff about it. It's the thing right now. It's also extremely sexually explicit. Now, you're an adult, and that show is clearly aimed at adults. So for you, maybe you're somebody who says, I can look away, maybe you fast forward or whatever it may be for you, that's cool. But with your kids, they don't have that same
maturity or filter.
Right. They may not click away as fast. That may be a kind of first exposure to them, and it's good to be aware that our culture has normalized this so much that even the stuff that you see on just mainstream TV, even outside of something like a paid access channel, is going to be far more graphic now than what it used to be. Shows that are on just normal networks that everybody watches are way more sexually explicit now than what they used to be back in the day. We were talking earlier about, I believe it was the Brady Bunch, maybe, was one of the first shows that ever showed two adults who shared a bed, like married adults. And I believe, and I may be wrong about this, but I believe that happened like part of the way through the show, and then in the beginning they had separate beds and everything, and people freaked out about it because that didn't used to be a thing. But now, even in mainstream shows that you don't have to have like special paid channels for or things like that, it's just right there. And then Netflix. We talked earlier about Netflix.
There's so many. Most of the shows posted on Netflix are MA and contain sexually graphic material. So a lot of parents don't think about, well, my kid doesn't have a computer or anything in their room. They're not allowed to have their phones in their room. But they have a TV where they play video games. Well, a lot of those video game consoles have access to Netflix and Hulu and other streaming services that contain sexually graphic content. And so a lot of times parents don't think of those things. They don't check to think to check the browsing history or the Netflix history. But sometimes there's stuff there that they have access to that you didn't realize they had access to.
Yeah.
And so there's stuff, even as adults, we may see that as that's an aesthetic part of the show to tell this part of the story. To them, no. They're developmentally not there yet. They cannot handle that yet. It's highly addictive. And in fact, not even just kids, but lots of... there's been studies done to show, speaking of Game of Thrones, that pornography websites have a huge hit on the night that Game of Thrones air. And that's... I think that just goes to show that the show stimulates erotic feelings even if it's presented in an aesthetic way. Enough so that pornography websites all over the web receive huge spikes in numbers on that night. And so it whets the appetite for something a little more hardcore. And so your kids could unknowingly be exposed to something that is sexually explicit, and you not realize it because of just the access that they have in normal everyday things like Netflix.
And I know that's very much, again, kind of stepping on toes. That's a very pointed thing, and I don't want to dwell on that so much. The point in bringing that up was just to realize that sexuality in our culture has changed a lot. It's such a normalized thing that kids are talking about it, they're joking about it, they're, even if they are just watching things that are just normal daytime TV, they're going to hear far more jokes and far more things than they used to. And it normalizes it. And that means that the first time that your kid is exposed to something that's more explicit, their reaction to say, that's probably not good, is going to be far less visceral than it would have been a few years back, because we weren't exposed to it in that same way that kids are now.
At such a young age.
Exactly. And it's not normalized in quite the same way. So just be aware. Again, please, no. Even if you have a good kid, this could come up. And if it has, that doesn't mean that you don't have a good kid. Everybody needs to have a plan and needs to be prepared for how to address these types of things.
Absolutely. All right. Let's move on to less heavy stuff. What do we do? What are some actual action steps that you can take as parents when it comes to managing technology in your home? So in light of everything that we discussed and some of the warning signs and some of the mental health contributions that some of this can have, we even talked about some of this in the mental health class we had last month. But based on a lot of questions that parents have and stuff that we've talked about, here's some action steps for you. So these might be a little bit random, but they're like little tidbits of helpful information, hopefully. So I've had parents ask, what if my kid has a Finsta, a fake Instagram account, or a spam account? A lot of times parents will say, hey, my kid, I'm monitoring their social media account, but they have this other account now too. Are they trying to hide something from me? And you should have that conversation with them. But most often, a Finsta account is not meant to be hidden from parents necessarily. It's not some secret account. It's just the account that they can be more real and less polished and just post everyday stuff. Whereas their normal account is more polished and is probably more performance driven. It has to be the highlight reel, the perfect stuff. So for us, we're like, well, I just share all that on my main stuff because I want to be real. Well, our students don't think that way. So if they have a Finsta account, don't be alarmed. It's probably harmless. You should still have the password to it.
Yes.
But that's what that is.
And to give some perspective on that too, a couple of just really quick examples. I have a friend of mine who's a parent who has just a regular Facebook, and then they also have a secondary Facebook account. The secondary account is one that they only have just kind of some very specific pictures of their lives because they don't want everybody to know everything about them. Then they have more of a private account where they're uploading pictures of their kids, and the only people that are aware of that Facebook account are their family members and close friends. And it's not because they have to hide something, it's just because, hey, everybody on the internet doesn't need to know about my child. Kind of a similar example for me personally, I do like graphic design type stuff. If somebody's gonna hire me to do something professional, I'm gonna edit my portfolio and have a specific portfolio that just shows professional type stuff. I'm not gonna have dorky cartoons that I've done, but if somebody's wanting to hire me to do cartoons, then I would show them this other edited portfolio. And sometimes it's the same way with your kids, where they're like, hey, it's not, just like you're saying, it's not that they have one account with all their dirty stuff and one without. It's just that, hey, like, this is my more artistic one where everything's polished and everything's filtered and it looks all pretty, and then this is the one where I can upload a picture of the, hilarious stain that my ketchup made on my pants that looks like a cat, whatever. I mean, and that's
that
silly.
Was very
I know,
off
but,
the cuff.
Right? Yeah.
It's
Thank
like
you.
You had that one locked and loaded.
But just be aware. Don't freak out. Again, go back to that first point. Don't freak out if your kid has a fake Insta, secondary Facebook account or something. But get access. Get access.
Yeah. You're not in trouble, but give me your password.
Right.
Okay. Beware of location services on various apps. So a lot of times when parents have internet safety conversations with their kids, which should be something that comes up often, is not just a one-time thing, then a lot of times we don't think about, well, like Instagram and Snapchat have location services. Sometimes predators use that. So make sure that they're aware of those settings and that they have them turned off unless they need to be because they're at Disney World and they're wanting to show that they're at Disney World. You know, that's a bit different. But in everyday life, they don't need to know if they're walking from school to Meijer and taking a selfie on the way. Nobody on Snapchat needs to see exactly where they're at that moment. Even if they're not posting right now on Snapchat, there's a location feature where if they have an account, their location is being shown even if they're not online. So be aware of that kind of stuff. Another thing is, just like in real life, you have the right to know everybody who's in your house. Kids aren't allowed to go to their bedrooms with certain people. The same is true when it comes to technology. So FaceTime, I always recommend to parents that only happens in a public area of the house because it's my house and I have a right to know who's here even if it's through FaceTime. This becomes a little bit of a theological conundrum for me because I feel like God is omnipresent, right? He's the only one that's omnipresent. Phones are a way for us to pretend to be omnipresent, but we weren't created to be omnipresent. So if that person if your kid is talking to a person through FaceTime, if they weren't on FaceTime, then they would actually be in the house and you would be able to see who it is. So you reserve the right, if your kid is on FaceTime, to be able to ask, hey, who is that? Because
they're my house.
This is my house. I deserve to know everybody who's here, even if it's on a screen. So that the reality is they are there. And your kids are talking to them, so you have the right to know. So that should just be a normal thing that your kids know, hey, my parents are going to ask me, who am I talking to, and that's fine. They can know because I don't have anything to hide because we prioritize openness and honesty. So that's something. Also, give your
next one.
Give your kids permission to throw you under the bus. So is this the one that you're?
Yeah, this.
So like, if they're like the code word thing that I had if I was at a friend's house, the same kind of thing. Give your kids permission to throw you under the bus. If they are concerned about a person sending them something or whatever, give them permission to say, hey, careful what you send me, careful what you say to me, even if it's on Snapchat or whatever. My parents have passwords to all my stuff and they can see anything that comes on my screen. That just lets their friends know, oh, okay, well, I better be careful what I say to you. And they can throw you under the bus and then it not damage their reputation, right? A lot of times they don't want to say anything because they don't want to be like, stingy or judgmental or whatever, but giving them permission to throw you under the bus is like, yeah, my stinking parents, they just monitor everything. They don't trust me. Wink, wink, right? Yeah. So give them permission. If they're talking with someone, I think Andy Stanley said this in a video, but if they're talking with someone and you're right there and they're asking them, if their friends are asking your kid if they can do something with them or whatever, and you're right there and they're asking you, but their friend is still either on FaceTime or whatever, or in the room with them, then they can say, can I or may I? And if they say, can I do so-and-so, it means I really want to go, can you? But if they want to be nice to their friends, but they don't really want to go, then say, may I? And that's kind of like code for, no, we have something that day. Like, you can't go. Oh, darn, and they can throw you under the bus again. So,
and your kids actually kind of like that kind of stuff. I feel like they're more inclined to participate when they have like their secret code or things like that because it's fun to a kid.
Yeah.
The next one, I'm going to pick on people a little bit again. I've already stepped on toes once, so might as well do it again. There's all sorts of things that us as parents might say, hey, this is not something that I'm into. Like maybe social media. Personally, I hate social media. The only reason that I use it is because it functions as a tool. I don't really like it for what it was intended to do. I really only like it because it allows me to share things with you guys. If it weren't for that, I probably wouldn't have one. But here's the thing. Like when your kid comes to you and they want to talk with you, maybe they're a young kid and they get really excited about Minecraft and they want to talk with you about that. You don't care. You're like, I don't care about this. I'm not going to start playing Minecraft right now. But it's your kid, and it's important to them. So you listen, and you do your best to be engaged and to become informed. The same thing applies to social media as they get bigger. You might not get it with social media. You might not have a social media right now, but the fact is, your kids as they grow up, odds are really, 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 really good they're going to want one, because everybody has one. They're going to want to get on Instagram. They're going to want to get on Snapchat. They're going to want to do things like that. And you can't afford to say, I'm not into social media. You need to have your own account for all the things that they do, because you need to know how it works. You need to know what they could be exposed to. It's as simple as with things like Instagram. Instagram lately has done a much better job, I think, of kind of filtering out that, like the search panel. It's a lot better than it used to be, especially. But even still, it is not hard for you to swipe left on your phone and then suddenly see things that maybe you don't want your kid to see. You wouldn't be aware of that if you didn't have an Instagram of your own. So, personally, again, sorry if I'm stepping on toes, but it's not good enough for us to say, I'm just not into Facebook, I'm sure it's fine. You as a parent need to become informed on the things that your kids are doing.
You need to have access. You need to be on the platforms they are on,
Yep.
and at least through their password. If not, if you don't want to have your own account, but you should probably have your own account, especially when it comes to the big ones. Perfect example of this is I had a mom one time in a previous ministry, nobody here, who this was their mindset. There was like, she had a daughter who was in middle school at the time. She can have it, but I don't get it and I don't want it. I don't need that on my phone. And so just refused to get Facebook or Instagram. Daughter was on Instagram, and it came to light, she was at this like mental breakdown because she had developed a friendship with a guy, a long distance relationship she had never met in person, who was a little bit older than her, and was threatening to kill himself if she didn't, comply with being his friend. And when she didn't want to talk to him anymore, he was saying, I'm going to kill myself. You're the only person that matters to me, all this kind of stuff. Well, she's all distraught, and she breaks down one day, and her mom is asking me for help. She's like, I don't know what to do. And we had to figure out that situation, and it was much more traumatic than it had to be, because if the mom had just had access to that account or even been on the platform at all, she could have been more aware of what her daughter was being exposed to and was around. And so that's something that's it can be a temptation, is to say, well, I don't want any part of that, but you owe it to your kids to be a part of it because they are a part of it or want to be a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's odds are pretty good. I don't think most of you guys would let your kid go to the movies without being somewhat aware of what they're seeing. Maybe you look up a review. Maybe you go to IMDb
who they're seeing
or something.
it with.
Exactly. And it's the same thing with social media. I mean, if you feel compelled to look up the sexual content of a movie before your kids go see it, then you should feel compelled to check out what Facebook is, to check out what Instagram is, to do the things that your kid is doing to make sure that it's good.
Snapchat's probably the most popular one that parents are not on. So, but yeah. And a word of encouragement too. This is our last thing. So thank you for bearing with us for the first 35 minutes of this class. But the last thing I'll say is we talked about the electronic contract or the phone covenant or whatever you want to call it, the agreement that you have your kids sign, and there's copies of it in the links in this description if you want to download it, print it off, and then have that conversation with your kids. We talked about last week how your biggest point of leverage is before you even hand them a phone. But I know a lot of you watching are like, well, I've got kids in middle school and high school who've had phones already for years. So what do I do? And you feel compelled to make some changes. Well, it is never too late. And you as the parent can always say, hey, and be open with them and say, we didn't have this when I was a kid. My parents didn't teach me this. I wasn't raised right about it to know how to raise you right about it. And I'd like to make some changes, not because I don't trust you, but because I have an obligation to protect you and a responsibility to make sure that you don't have access to things you shouldn't have to carry. We don't want you to carry burdens that you don't need to be carrying, secrets and all that kind of stuff. So this is a contract. This is the way I want to do things. I understand you may be upset about it, but this is what I really feel like I need to do. And your kids will push back and say, well, I can handle it, and they can give most of the time pretty convincing arguments of why they can handle it. But it's your obligation as a parent, given authority by God to raise your kids and to protect them, to be able to say, hey, you know what, we're just going to start over. And they will probably put up a fight, but the storm will blow over, and you'll have a much better footing to then preemptively combat some of the tensions that come with social media and technology, and you're not always reacting at that point. And so it's never too late to start over. And honestly, kids appreciate long-term when you're open and honest with them about those things. That you don't get everything right because you're human just like they are. And you're learning just like they are.
Yeah.
And so there's no shame in that. There's no reason to beat yourself up about it. This is still all relatively new stuff. We're in this grand social experiment with the smartphone, smart devices. So that's the last word of encouragement I have. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Just thank you guys for watching this. Even just taking the time to be able to engage with this shows that you're concerned and that your kid's safety is important to you. Know that we're here to help. If you have questions, if you have concerns, if you are one of those people who says Snapchat is not for me, but you decide you want to check it out, if you need help with that, we could show you things. Just don't hesitate to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. We've done the research now.
Correct.
So,
thank you guys for watching this. This has been the second part of the second part of our parenting classes. This is episode 4. So we've kind of wrapped up our series for this year, and we're thrilled that we got a chance to be able to do this with you guys.
Yeah. If you have something else that you want us to talk about in the future, then feel free to comment about that or email us. Our emails are on the website. Or get a hold of us on Instagram or Snapchat. Actually, I don't have Snapchat. Do you have Snapchat? No, I don't like Snapchat.
I had a Snapchat for long enough to learn how it works so that I could protect children.
Ditto. But, and then I hated it.
Yeah, exactly. I was the same way. I was like, this is stupid. Why do I have this?
Yeah.
But
we're
anyway.
on Facebook as well. So
Yeah.
I think that's all we got for you guys. Again, thank you, and I hope this was beneficial. We will catch you later.
Bye, guys.